And this week marks the 60th anniversary of the Cuban Missile Crisis, a historic showdown between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. Tensions during that month-long nuclear standoff inspired many, here and across the country, to install below-ground fallout shelters. In another piece in his occasional ongoing series, Where We Live, 17's Robert Bryce set out to discover what's left of them.
Together we shall save our planet, or together we shall perish in its flames.
As dangerous a place as the world might seem now, once upon a time it was more dangerous still. 6 decades ago, the Cold War, communism versus the free world, was at a fever pitch. School children were being taught to duck and cover, and fallout shelters like this were in high demand.
The basement of any house or building will become a good improvised shelter if you block the windows with sandbags. They may be used as shelters from fallout. Stock it with food and supplies.
In fact, fallout shelters were big business for local companies like McCarthy Tank and Steel, which placed regular ads in the newspaper. General mistrust of the Soviet Union turned into nuclear paranoia after the Kremlin ordered the Allies out of West Berlin in 1958 and moved in with tanks to make their point, igniting the so-called Berlin crisis. The Allies refused to back down, and in 1961, the Soviets built the Berlin Wall. Then, 60 years ago, the Cuban Missile Crisis, a 35-day showdown between John F. Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev in October 1962. The Soviets set up bases on Cuba with batteries of ballistic missiles and pointed them at the U.S., prompting President Kennedy to issue warnings to the Soviets and to the American people.
Can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere.
Americans started actively preparing themselves for the possibility of a nuclear holocaust. That's when fallout shelters took off in popularity. Some were made of concrete, some, like this one, were steel cylinders.
So once the nuclear bomb blast goes off and you can no longer get out the way you came in, how do you escape? With this, through the escape hatch, you just need a wrench, a shovel, and people willing to start digging.
Milton Spartacus Miller, owner of the Padre Hotel, offered his hotel's basement as a fallout shelter for anyone and everyone. The city of Bakersfield, which was in the midst of a showdown with Spartacus over his unwillingness to install fire sprinklers, was not impressed, but the county was. Supervisors voted to officially designate the Padre as a civil defense shelter. The U.S. government didn't merely put up with all this talk of fallout shelters, they encouraged it.
So if there has been an explosion of a nuclear weapon within a few hundred miles of you, you should suspect fallout.
Even publishing a booklet, How to Build Your Own Bunker. Can a cinder block box withstand radioactive fallout from a nuclear bomb? Those who actually built them apparently liked to think so. Some local schools created fallout shelters, at least 2, Bakersfield High and East Bakersfield High, both built before the Cold War, converted their thick concrete basements into bunkers. This is a tunnel under East High, linking one campus bunker to the other. Those shelters still hold 60-year-old rations, possibly stale by now. In October 1961, Bakersfield television personality Don Rodwald and his wife Shirley participated in a stunt sponsored by a local pool builder. Yes, a full year before the Cuban Missile Crisis. They lived in an 8-foot by 12-foot fallout shelter at the corner of 18th and Chester for 2 weeks and fought bouts of despondency over their inability to move around. Retired attorney Randy Dickow was a friend and fellow Bakersfield College instructor.
But when it was done, it was an in-kind payment, and the company asked him, did he want a fallout shelter or a pool? He goes, I'll take the pool. I don't need a fallout shelter.
Good call. The threat waned, and homeowners with bunkers in their backyards either forgot about them or turned them into storage sheds or game rooms for the kids. Rick Kreiser thought he too was getting a swimming pool at his family's house on Holland Street, but no, his father, newspaper editor Ralph Kreiser, filled that huge hole in the backyard with an immense metal cylinder. The kids made the best of it.
We'd get a kick out of playing down there and, you know, the magazines and what have you as kids, but that wore off pretty quickly when you find things down there. So we weren't big fans of that, but later on, My brother and I were really into photography. Black and white was pretty easy. So we made it a really nice darkroom. We had it in larger, and we had all the chemicals, and back to that air circulation probably wasn't real good for us.
The Kern County Museum installed this cinder block bunker in the early 60s as a demonstration of what the public might do. An above-ground entrance over an 8-foot deep hole in the ground. And build it they did, those homeowners. At this house in Bakersfield's Alta Vista neighborhood, the homeowner covered up his backyard fallout shelter with a homemade picnic table, which lifts out to reveal a fire pit. At this house in the Oleander district, the owner uses his bunker for storage. This homeowner in southeast Bakersfield just gave up and deeded his bunker to the spiders. With time, fallout shelters became the stuff of legend when they were remembered at all. All over the city, all over the country, buried fallout shelters, some collecting dust and spider webs, some, if they're sealed and airtight, empty vessels filled with 60-year-old air. But are fallout shelters making a comeback? An internet search reveals they are, thanks in part to the war in Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin has dropped broad hints that he's not averse to using tactical nuclear weapons, and Western Europe is nervous about it. President Biden addressed the mood in early October. Russian President Vladimir Putin is not joking when he talks about the use of tactical nuclear weapons or biological or chemical weapons. We have not faced the prospect of Armageddon since Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis. Is it time to sweep out the old fallout shelter and switch out those 60-year-old cans of pork and beans? Some may want to consider it, but most probably wouldn't dream of such a thing. Fallout shelters harken back to a time of pervasive fear and uncertainty. We can look back at them now with a sense of nostalgia, quaint relics of post-war paranoia.
Might fallout shelters one day make comebacks? A few hours in one of these subterranean vaults can only lead you to one conclusion. Let's certainly hope not. Underground in Bakersfield, Robert Price, 17 News.